Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear viewers, I am Faiza, your host in your own show, Meri Pehchan, and I hope and pray that you all are doing well by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah protect you all from all the worldly evils and hereafter. Keep you all safe, healthy, and happy in all manners. Today we will be talking about how we should figure out the truth in our lives, in personal lives, in political life, and in religious life, how we can reach out to that truth, because without finding out the truth we won't understand our mistakes, we won't understand where we are being trapped by different powers, and we won't be able to move forward, and we won't be able to take right decisions in our lives. Like a beautiful quote I have seen, and it says like, truth is a habit of integrity, not a strategy of politics. And in the political scenario we do see a lot of like half truth, or some certain facts which are twisted, and we don't even understand what's going on, and things are shown differently, and whereas in actual place they are very different from what is propagated, what is shown, and what is we see in media and through different forms of information, or branches of information we take information from. And we'll talk about like mainstream media coverage of Ukraine facts or propaganda. We'll use this current scenario as an example in order to figure out the truth, and the strategies we can use in order to reach out to the truth regarding a for example this issue. And if we need to for that reason we do have a very special guest with us, Sister Rebecca Masterton, and she has been with us in previous discussions as well, and we'll see how she talks about it, and how she is going to see this matter, and how she can help us find a way, like what is truth and where we can find it. We will welcome her in our show and move forward to our guest.
Inviting me on this program.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me today and on this important issue. And I'm really grateful for your time. And everyone knows, like, Sister Rebecca is she's PhD, and she is a religious scholar as well, and she has a very she is kind of researcher as well. So we know, she is always have a very different viewpoint on these things. So I'm very grateful for having you on the show, and I would like to know, sister, like, from this topic, the one we have discussed earlier regarding mainstream media coverage of Ukraine facts or propaganda. So how do you see, first of all, I would like to know, like, what is truth and why it is important for individuals and the society to understand the truth? How does it impact their individual life and the collective social life?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. A very good question. What is truth? I think that when we look back in history, we just take Islamic history as an example of how the truth of the message that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent to bring, people attempted to distort that message or delete parts of it, or misinterpret it according to their own interests. And then with regard to Islamic history itself, we can also see there is a huge debate about where the truth lies about what happened after the death of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his holy progeny. So people, there has always been this battle over the truth. There have been those who strive to obscure the truth, and there's those who strive to reveal the truth. as well. And we can see in early Islamic history that even back then, the Muslims were very confused as to what's right and what's wrong. Who do we follow? Who's speaking the truth? Because there were people who were distorting the facts and very, they were kind of on a campaign to brainwash Muslims into, for example, believing that Imam Ali alayhi salam was a crook or a liar, or he didn't pray, or we know there were Muslims who were given enough propaganda to reach the point where when he reached his shahada, there were people who were surprised that he had been struck while praying, while in salah, because such were the lies that had been disseminated among the Muslims that they had become convinced that the wrong side was the right side and the right side was the wrong side. So this is a challenge for all of us to be very careful. We have to, we see Imam Ali alayhi salam in his sermons in Nahj al-Balagha has talked about the importance of the intellect, using our judgment, having insight. For example, there's a note that says it is better to lose your eyesight than to lose your insight. It's better to be physically blind than not to have your aql, than not to understand what's going on around you. So there has always been this case of people trying to manipulate other people, gain power over other people, and they do that by lying and distorting the truth. So our task is to constantly be searching. Is that correct or not? Is that correct or not? And don't just be convinced by the emotion with which something is said.
That's lovely. And I would like to know, sister, like how in today's scenario in which politics, religion, and hypocritic, strategies are being used against, especially for Muslims, and Muslims are still in a kind of deep sleep, and they are not like listening and hearing and attentive towards the truth they are should be in search of. So how would you in practical scenario like we have chosen today, for the coverage of Ukraine and Russia, a war, we have conflict, you can say, or the war, how would you see that conflict, and how one can figure out the truth in today's scenario, and how important it is for Muslims, especially to be aware of these truths, and how it's gonna impact on their this life, and how it is connected to our, for example, afterlife?
Good questions. Yes. So I noticed with regard to the events in Ukraine, I don't really I don't watch well, I don't have a TV, so I don't watch satellite media, but I am connected online like everybody is today. So I observe what's going online, and what I observed going on online among Muslims who are living in the Western zone, in the West, they just immediately, most of them immediately accepted the propaganda that's being put out in the media. And that propaganda, now let's just say from the beginning that I'm not taking either side here. So I'm not supporting Putin, I'm not supporting Ukraine. I'm just trying to find out what is going on. But we see that the Muslims in the Western zone very quickly accepted the propaganda put out there that Putin is this megalomaniac, power crazy, mad, fanatic who wants to. He's got no reason for invading Ukraine. He wants to have Ukraine's resources. And so Muslims in the West were starting to give their opinions and say, these are the resources that Ukraine has, and this is why Putin is this crazy, power-hungry, greedy man who just wants to invade Ukraine's resources. And Ukraine is a free, democratic country that is being invaded by a despot. And so now a lot of the Muslims are getting carried away by these words, free and democratic. And so everybody's suddenly gone hysterical and saying that we support Ukraine because we support freedom, we support democracy. And this is put out everywhere. It's being put out. Again, what's being established in the media is that you must support Ukraine, because if you don't support Ukraine, you are a traitor. If you don't demonize Putin and say he's the worst man walking the planet and he's awful, if you don't say that, then you are a fascist, right-wing fascist who is associated, who accepts someone who is unacceptable. And so there's a psychological manipulation going on. We saw this happening with COVID, that the debate is being shut down. People who want to have a discussion, who want to have another viewpoint, are being demonized. And so there's a psychological coercion and manipulation, and for everyone to go, oh yeah, okay, we will say we agree with Ukraine, because if we stand with Ukraine, because if I don't say that, then all my friends are going to hate. Everyone's going to hate me on social media, and I'm going to be attacked by everybody that I know. This is psychological manipulation. But actually, there have been a handful of voices that have come out, a couple of months on social media, and Twitter yesterday, looking at the account of an ex-diplomat, Craig Murray, who was a diplomat in, I think it was Tajikistan, and he reports on human rights. So people were giving their views on that, and a lot of them are highlighting the fact that the reason why there has been this invasion of Ukraine is because the NATO, the West, has consistently ignored potential peace agreements with Putin. They have built up their military bases very close to the Russian border. And so actually it's the West that wants Ukraine's resources. The West, Europe has never really acted Ukraine as part of the European Union. Ukraine has been kind of stuck in the middle. And Ukraine does have a very strong neo-Nazi movement, very well known, supported again by, say, British government. It's a very overt neo-Nazi movement, and a lot of those neo-Nazis are now part of the Ukrainian army. So, since the Second World War, Britain has been de-Nazi, like the Nazis are the worst people walking the planet. But now, when it's not convenient for Britain to have that position, suddenly the people in Ukraine, or let's say the Ukrainian government, suddenly they're not Nazis anymore. They're just freedom-loving Europeans. And so this is where the lies come out and the truth distorted. Like I said, a lot of Muslims, they also, along with everybody else, they react to the emotion, because the media out there is trying to manipulate us through emotion. They react to the emotion, and they just automatically accept the narrative that's being disseminated. And let's not forget that a lot of our media as well is controlled by defense. British media, a lot of it is just it's just an outlet for Ministry of Defence and British intelligence that are trying to manipulate the populations into having a particular position, and then that will help Britain to further its objectives, because the population is behind the government, not knowing that they are just being duped into supporting the government. Yeah.
So, sister, how would you see, like, the way you discussed, like, when things are manipulated and, if viewpoint is controlled through whatever means, the way you said, like, they are like playing emotional, strategies in which they shape up a certain scenario in a certain way that we emotionally react to that certain thing, but we don't look it wisely, and where is the freedom of expression and where is the freedom of truth? Because whenever we talk about West or Western media or things like that, there is always a slogan that this is West and everything, there is a freedom of expression and there is a freedom of this and there is a freedom of that. So how do you see that slogan in this particular scenario, when they are you can say, like, media is working like a tool behind the, you can say, real powers or political powers, and they are shaping up or affecting the real viewpoint of a certain nation or society or whatever you say. So where that expression lies then? Where is truth and where is freedom of expression? And if somebody would try to understand the truth, I feel, from the discussion we have now and from the facts we see, like, we don't even want to look at the truth. And even if somebody comes up with the truth, falsehood, or you can say the lies are so dominantly prevailing that we don't even believe on truth in the end, you can say. So how would you respond to this thing, and where is freedom of expression in such countries and such places?
Yes. So even, say, people in Britain believe that they have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I found out when I converted to Islam in 1999 that actually certain people have freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and certain people don't. So, as long as people are not challenging, really, really, really challenging the powers that be, say in Britain as well, then they are allowed to speak. But if if there are people that really kind of want to challenge the general story that's being put out there, they want to challenge the narrative, they want to put a stop to the psychological manipulation, then they can write articles which won't get published. They won't be invited to speak on media. So actually, the freedom of speech is very selective. Across Europe, it's very selective. There may be that there's a kind of, I suppose, allowance for people to make critical comments about the government, about the prime minister, which maybe in other countries is not allowed. But how the British government deals with that, so that can, it can look like people are free because they can criticize today's Prime Minister Boris Johnson. There's been a lot of criticism of him and jokes and ridicule and mockery because he's shown, how he consistently lies. But how people are handled, the population is handled, is different. people are allowed to, like I said, they can criticize up to a point, but that criticism is contained. Like it doesn't, it doesn't have, we could say, real bite. It's not ultimately going to really threaten anyone's position. So it's allowed. It's like when there was the invasion of Iraq, and in 2003, and there was the biggest demonstration against the invasion of Iraq in 2003. This was not considered as a threat because the British government went ahead and invaded Iraq anyway. And what this government knows, what these governments know, is that we don't have, aside from the British Army, say, we don't have really a kind of a militarily independent population. We have a mentally subjugated population. So, and we are made to believe that the way to get things done is to say something, come out and speak, go to your member of parliament, get it discussed in parliament, go through the law. This is what people are told how they should handle things. But this is all just a way of ensuring that they are very passive, that actually they're looking up to them and saying, well, we're doing things in the legal way, we're doing things in the right way, we're going for a peaceful demonstration, because that's what we've been told is the way to do things. And what the government is doing is just saying, fine, you said what you want to say, now we're just going to continue to do what we want to do. And then when the government continues to do what it wants to do, the people don't do anything. Then they're stuck. Because it's like, oh, well, we had our demonstration, we had our debate in parliament, we spoke out. Now that we're being ignored, well, what do you do then? And that is the scenario. So this freedom of speech, number one, is limited, it's controlled, and thirdly, it's ignored. You can say what you like, but if the government's just going to ignore you, this is what happens in our courts in the UK, that people who have evidence to prove their innocence will not be allowed to speak in court. So so that's the strategy. People are silenced and ignored. That's how their freedom of speech is managed and controlled.
So, what do you think, according to the, you can say, like teachings of Islam or teaching of Aima alayhi salam, or you can say the humans psyche, you can say, because as a fitra we all human are same, and we like stand for justice and we stand for everything. So what responsibility do we have as a human being to come out of this trap and break this trap, or what strategies a truth seeker can use in order to reach out the truth?
Nowadays, I think because of international media, it is getting easier for people to exchange information and to try to uncover the truth more. There are attempts now, as we're seeing on social media and on YouTube and things, there are attempts to silence people, to ban their channels and threaten them, and so things are changing slowly, but people need to develop a mindset which is that, let me stand back and let me just wait, take a little bit of time and wait and investigate and confirm, seek to confirm that what is being said is correct. So you have that kind of balance within yourself as a person. You start to develop an analytical tendency, Because what we see with Muslim populations across the world is that it's always their emotion that is being appealed to. And they think they're going to get things done by putting their heart into something, going for demonstrations and passionately, calling out slogans. But we can see that, over the last few decades, this hasn't really worked. There's always these emotional reactions to different scenarios, but there isn't a lot of calm analysis that's going on. So we need to raise our children to, when you hear something, you think, okay, maybe let me look somewhere else and see what someone else is saying. And even then, when you've got two sides, this is what we've seen happening in, with the situation with Ukraine, is that you've got the pro-Ukraine story, you've got the pro-Russia story, then you've got the individual human story, which is ultimately what is important. So yesterday I was looking at a video of a reporter who was in a part of Ukraine, in a village that has had bombings going on by Russia. And the reporter in this woman, and he said, how's it been for you? How's the people being treated in the village? And she said, well, generally both sides, Ukrainian fighters and Russian fighters, have been very polite to us. She said the Ukrainian fighters have broken into some shops and stolen some goods. But generally, and yes, the bombings are very scary and we're hiding in the basement at night. But how we are being treated by the soldiers is that we're being, respected by both sides. So actually, that gives you the human picture, which is that this is a political war and that both sides, parts of the Ukraine, elements of the Ukrainian side, elements of the Russian side, they don't, as much as they can, they don't want to frighten or damage the population. So, this is another important thing when we're thinking of the teacher Bayt alayhim salam, and this is the trap that Muslims fall into. We all fall into the trap of propaganda, ideology, slogans, passionate shouting, black and white thinking. You've got to be on our side, otherwise you're the enemy. And that stops us from thinking that actually things are always more complicated than they look. So if we want to get to the truth, we have to try to get a wider picture of what's going on, because otherwise, if we don't have a good understanding of what's going on, we will take the wrong action. So there's a hadith in Al-Kafi where Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he narrates from the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, who said that the inaction of the aql, the person with aql, is better than the action of the jahil. So someone who has aql, who can see what's going on, but who isn't jumping into a scenario and rashly kind of, going in and doing what they think they do. The inaction of someone who has aql is better than an action that is taken by a jahil, someone who doesn't have knowledge. Because this is what we see in the world today, where we see disasters happening. It is because we are acting on ignorance and on blind passion and slogans. And, of course we love the truth, but we are not well informed. So I'm not well informed. When the whole Russia-Ukraine thing started and suddenly everyone is having some opinion on Russia and Ukraine, I thought, well, I don't really know what's gone on. Suddenly this has it in the media, but it must have been building up over the last few years. These things don't come out of nowhere. So let's look at what's been happening in the last few years. Let's look at all the things that have been going on behind the scenes to ultimately bring about this situation. So, so Ahl alayhim salam, they taught us to have patience, and to use aql, and to do our research, to search for the truth before we're taking an action.
Hmm. So, how would you see the media coverage given to the Ukraine and Russia war, and how things are manipulated? Because if we see, there are different wars in past. We have seen like Iraq and Syria and Libya, and there are so many places which were bombed and which were like in situations of like wars and conflicts and things like that. So, how do you see the difference in those media coverages and the media coverage this time Ukraine and Russia is having? What difference do you see, or what are the difference, or are there any differences in that scenario, or if there is no difference and they are very like truthful coverage is being given or something like that?
Well, first of all, we can see that, for example, the conflict in Yemen has been largely ignored by the
Hmm.
media, and and this is a conflict that has been exacerbated by Britain, who has been supplying Saudi Arabia with weapons.
Hmm.
And we see the conflict in Bahrain being ignored
Hmm.
because we know that the ruling families there are also supported by Britain. Uh, what has been interesting is how reporters in various outlets have clearly stated. I saw someone who listed the number of reporters that have said this. They have clearly stated that the people being bombed, these are not Syrians or Afghans. These are blonde-haired, blue-eyed Europeans like us. Those are the
Hmm.
terms that have been used, very, very clearly stating, this is a civilized city that has been bombed, ignoring the fact that Aleppo was, there's plenty of cities in Syria that were civilized. Um, so we have a lot of backward thinking among mainly Western reporters who are prioritizing the conflict in Ukraine just because these people are, more like Western Europeans. Now, someone pointed out Craig Murray's thread. Even though these Western reporters, say Australian reporters, American, European, even they have pointed out that Ukrainians are, they look like us, so to speak. Eastern Europeans, nevertheless, are seen as second-class Europeans by Western Europeans. So I'll just put that in there. That, I mean, there's this kind of hierarchy. At the bottom of the hierarchy are the Syrians and the Yemenis and the Afghans, and then the next step up is the Eastern Europeans. But Eastern Europeans have never been welcomed by Western Europeans. I mean, they've been brought in to work in the fields by Western Europeans on the tomato farms and the strawberry farms, and to do jobs that Western Europeans don't want to do. But generally, they haven't been liked by Western Europeans. So we had a lot of Polish people coming in a few years ago, and they were disliked by people here. We've had Polish people in Britain being killed, beaten up and killed by by British people, white British people. So there's a hierarchy of who is acceptable and who isn't acceptable, who's like us and who's not like us. And actually, what this does show is that perhaps is a dangerous sign. It's becoming more acceptable to be more openly pro blonde hair, blue eyes. This is
Hmm.
coming from the Nazi ideology, that had this idea of a superior race, the Aryan race who are superior. And so Ukrainian reporters coming out and saying, well, these people are blonde-haired. And by the way, they aren't all blonde-haired and blue-eyed. I mean, half of them are not blonde-haired and blue-eyed. They've got brown hair and they've got brown eyes. But anyway, it's kind of like this gradual acceptance of this idea that these people are more human because they are more like Western Europeans. They're still Eastern European, which means second class, but they're a bit more like Western Europeans than Syrians or Yemenis.
That's really interesting. So, how do you think, like in this era, like in this, especially in this conflict, in which we see Ukraine and kind of Russia conflict, the role of Pakistan and the role of our media in there, for example, how you see that, and even in the West, how you see that, what differences you have found in the kind of propagation ongoing, and what kind of messages, and what if we have to, for example, take the right perspective of the whole thing, how we can take that.
So yes, it's interesting to see that Prime Minister Imran Khan recently had a very friendly meeting with President Putin. And there's actually quite an amusing video on YouTube about how President Putin has treated, for example, Emmanuel Macron from France, where he made him sit at the end of a very long table, supposedly social distancing. But this very, very long table, this is what Putin does. He's done it with a few people, sits them at the end of this very, very long table. Whereas with Imran Khan, he was sitting very closely with him, side by side in a chair, and very relaxed. And they both get on with each other. They've shaken hands with each other. Again, and I'm not supporting Imran Khan as a prime minister. I'm just giving the scenario of what's going on. He doesn't seem to mind about maybe being attacked for being friendly towards President Putin. He's not just automatically going to follow the psychological pressure of Western countries to support the position of the West. And I know that all of these decades, Pakistan has had a lot of financial support from United States and Britain. Britain has had very close relations with Pakistan as well. And of course, then we've got the media that is promoting Western culture as a modern culture to aspire to, and that Islamic culture is backward and embarrassing. This is what's put out in the media in Pakistan. And perhaps now we are seeing a change with regard to Pakistan's position. What I have read is that a country such as Pakistan is finding that United States and Britain are not reliable allies. They change their position depending on other things going on in the region, and always according to their own interests. And so Pakistan is finding, yeah.
There's a caller, sister, so I would like to share their viewpoint, and we see what they say. Assalamu alaikum. Who is calling? Where are you calling from?
Faiza branch of Viewpoint से बात कर रहा हूँ.
जी भाई क्या?
जी भाई. मेरा सबसे बड़ा question है, the West not left on the Ukraine people, because Iraq, Syria, like my sister was saying, and like Afghanistan, they all let all run to it. They too scared of Russia. They played the game with people's mind, and I think it's too much bloodshed. And they're not capable of to fight with Russia. They make an excuses. And another thing, the Prime Minister went to the appointment was written, the time was set. Doesn't matter Russia went in a war, that's the people taken as a negativity. Like when India took over the Kashmir, when he sent more troops there, all the Western countries, leaders gone to India and everything. People see as that way, where his appointment has done with any country. The diplomat always goes, the Prime Minister always goes. That's no big issue. It's not like Pakistan support Russia or anything. It's nothing to do with that. You have to deal with all the countries. Like section is only playing games in front of us people, like taxpayer people. The section doesn't do nothing to any country. As they did it to Iran, Iran is still standing there. So there is no Russia standing more like that. They need to fight. If they're truly supporting Ukraine, they need to fight back. Otherwise, they won't do it. It's the poor people get killed for nothing. Just because they give them a hope or with you. With you, it's not by the mouth. Should do the action because they're scared of Russia. If any other country, they all jump in one day. They're all there with ammunition, with everything. I think this is no fair. They should sit on the table, make a deal between Ukraine and Russia, and stop the bloodshed. That's a good solution. The section and making a more war, that's no solution for the world. This is coming to Europe now. It's going to be a more big thing. People should not take it easy, Put the factor on, people like us, it's going to be affected. Everything's going to go higher, and it's bloody things. I don't think so. This is the right idea for sections on.
All right. I think so. Their call has been dropped, and how's your viewpoint on that, sister? The way you were saying, it's more like a human disaster in the political conflict, and obviously, Russia has like a kind of strong position on that, obviously, but in the end, humans are suffering, and human are being killed and in a suffering mode in whatever, and we need to come to an end kind of on a peaceful solution or something like that. So how I would like you to complete your the viewpoint you were sharing previously, and then you can also reflect on this as well.
Inshallah. Yes. So actually, well, to complete the point, also to respond to the caller with regard to the position of Pakistan and other countries as well. I have read that things are changing globally, and this is all to do with resources as well. So ultimately, these conflicts are always about the supply of resources, gas and oil and minerals. That's what it's down to most of the time. And what we see is that, for example, the Gulf countries, as the caller said, I mean, the Gulf countries are in an awkward position because, again, they are becoming increasingly dependent upon Russia for their trade. They've got active trade going on with Russia, and they're getting psychologically pressured from Britain and US to support Britain and US's position. But this is going to be a problem for the Gulf countries because they are, they have fairly good relations with Russia, and so a peaceful solution. I mean, this conflict was partly brought about, like I said, because NATO has started to encroach, on up to the Russian border. So Putin has tried to have a peaceful solution. He has set some conditions, for example, for a Ukrainian government not to mistreat Russian-speaking Ukrainians. There are pro-Russian, Russian-speaking Ukrainians who have been attacked and had their gas and electricity cut off. They've had their shops closed down. So they have been persecuted by the Ukrainian government. And some conditions that Putin put out was, don't harass and target pro-Russian and Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Leave them alone. And another thing with regard to NATO was, don't build your bases up to our border. Stand off from our border, because this is an act of aggression. And the West has ignored these conditions that were set out. So if we are going to have a peaceful solution, again, we don't just go by what the mainstream media is saying, which is that, Putin is this crazy violent man and he should come to the table and find a peaceful solution because people are getting killed. Because that is not, as somebody else pointed out, Putin's not crazy. He's very, very calculating. He's always been a very calculating, strategic person. Yes, I'd say pretty ruthless. Definitely Russia, in the way it went into Chechnya, or what it even did in Syria, and now what it's doing in Ukraine. Ruthless, it is. Russia goes out to make a point to the world that, enough is enough, and it doesn't stand back. But then again, we see the West doing the same thing as well. Quite happy to financially back Daesh, for an example, knowing very well that innocent people are going to be killed as a result of Daesh, say, go into Syria, and acting as proxies for certain Western powers. So, and again, according to the propaganda, it's like we hear about the killings that go on from the Russian side, the war crimes, but we don't hear about the war crimes that have been perpetrated by the Western side. Well, so actually, people need to be heard. People, perhaps our whole political systems, so-called democratic systems of having governments and depending upon relying on governments to do the right thing, which they are not doing the right thing. Well, perhaps we need to rethink this whole so-called democratic system and think about how people can take back power into their own hands.
Sister, we have just left with a rest of the 5 minutes, so I would like you to, because there was a very interesting, you can say, a discussion going on yesterday, or I think the day before, I can't remember, but there was a report they were saying a Ukraine army, I think so, force, who was a kind of suicide bomber or something like that, and he was very much praised on that. And even in the media in UK, they were saying if anyone wants to go and support Ukraine or something like that. So I would like you to just respond to that kind of comparison, and how do you see that, and if you can conclude it in your own words, how it works, and how what kind of hypocrisy we see in these situations.
Yes, there's a good channel which I can recommend to people called Smile to Jenna. That's on YouTube, and run by this quite funny British Muslim man. Funny as in, he's kind of being ironic about many things. And he's highlighted a lot of the hypocrisies. Yes, for example, that, all of these decades, suicide bombers have been seen as crazy fanatics and terrorists. But yes, in the media, they show an Iranian man who was willing to blow himself up in order to push back the Russian forces, and this was praised in the media. So himself as a suicide bomber was then praised by the Western media. Another thing that this man on Smile to Jenna pointed out was that, again, in Western media, British media, people have been saying that they are going to just get their packs on and go and fight in Ukraine, and they have been encouraged, whereas it's actually illegal to do that. it's illegal for British citizens to go and fight the army of a foreign power. So again, when we had the conflict in Syria between Daesh and the Syrian government, of course, so many went from Europe to go and fight in Syria, and this was considered as treason. It's illegal. And there was a lot of discussion as to whether they should be let back into the UK because they've committed treason. Effectively, they should have their citizenship revoked, taken away from them. And so we see the opposite happening with this conflict in Europe, that in the British media, people are being praised for going and fighting. And he even pointed out that it looks like there's some crisis actors that are pretending to kind of pack their backpacks and go and fight in Ukraine. So
and there was very interesting point as well, if you can point out that as well, the feminism part. It was really interesting and I really enjoyed watching it. Like I think so 18 to 60 men can't go, but rest of the people can go. And he said like, it was really funny and mesmerizing as well. Obviously we don't say like you break the laws or you go and do anything wrong or illegal, but obviously this is kind of hypocrisy this system do show. So if you want to point out, just we have 1 minute left, so we have to conclude it.
Yes, he also made a very good point that while the men, Ukrainian men, so the people who are being evacuated from you are women and children. The men are being left to fight. And this man on Smarter Jenna, he said, where are the feminists? Why are they not, suddenly saying that they want to fight as well? Like there's the silence there.
Yeah.
So again, feminists, they want equality. Why aren't they arguing for their right to stay in Ukraine? And why are they, thinking of getting out? So yes, there's a lot of hypocrisy, and we need to really kind of do our research. There's a lot of lies. There's a lot of propaganda going out. And so we need to be careful what we hear and careful what we see, and always double check.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sister Rebecca. I'm really grateful for your time and input. And I would just, it's honor to have you on the show as well. And it's always really rich discussion we have, and I learn a lot from that as well. Thank you so much for your time. And to the viewers, I will just say that we need to be the seeker of truth, seeker of humanity, seeker of right mindset. Because if we won't do that, our generations will suffer in any way. So even if we support or even if we don't support, but if we support, we'll stand with justice, and we will stand with humanity, and we will stand with the right laws of Islam as well. So keep an eye on the right facts and make your opinion not based on the media facts or media hypocrisy. Figure out what is truth and stand by it. Thank you so much for your time and have a lovely day. Take care. See you inshallah next week. Allah Hafiz.